Welcome to Third Fridays, the monthly legal talk show from Lois LLC featuring attorney Christian Seesaw. This is the original forum in which real attorneys discuss workers' compensation issues, share their opinions, and engage in colorful conversations. This show showcases diverse perspectives of attorneys handling workers' comp cases, including case law trends, practical litigation strategies, and hot topics. Here's your host, Christian Seesaw.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the December 2025 Third Fridays podcast. The end of the year is here, and to kind of bring everything together, I have a few guests to talk about how their year has been. Typically, everybody, not just us, is thinking about, what happened that worked, what happened that we could improve upon. We're no different. But before we get into it, I wanted to reference last month's episode with my partner, Joseph Melchioni. We had a show where we detailed our favorite impact and gratitude statements of the past month, because November is typically gratitude month. I guess not just at Lois Law Firm, but we make a specific emphasis to be thankful for who we work with, maybe tell a joke here and there about, a favorite adversary or a favorite judge, certain things that keep the vibes up and make us realize that, even on, particularly tough day or a day where things don't go right, the routine of writing an impact or a gratitude statement here really refreshes the memory to keep things positive and know that there is typically something that we can be proud of. So that was a great episode. If anybody wants to check that out, it was one of the ones that kind of pushed us over a benchmark that we're proud of. But let's get into today's show. We're going to talk about 2025 Wrapped at Lois Law Firm. So from the perspective of a new attorney or an attorney completing their first calendar year at Lois Law Firm, I welcome to the show Elizabeth Pappas, Yasir, Miah, and Katie Dilts. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, Christian. Hey, everyone.
So you guys have this honor, I guess, of closing out 2025 in an entirely new firm. And I'm sure that, even if you're not resolution minded like me heading into 2026, it's hard not to think about it. We started the month with a year in review, led by our managing partner here, Greg Lois. And we talked about important cases that came down over the past year that may shape how we practice, how we advise clients in 2026 and beyond. Like I said, even if you're not focused on 2026, it's kind of hard to avoid the idea that 2025 is completely wrapped, right? So, when we think about that, you guys coming up on the end of your year here, I want to take you back to when you first interviewed or when you first applied or when someone reached out to you to talk about this particular firm. What was the direction of your particular career, before that first step that made you involved with Lois Law Firm? Like where were you in your career arc, so to speak? So if anybody has, any thoughts on that to jump in, go right ahead.
Sure, I'll go. Elizabeth Pappas here. So my background was in general civil litigation, and as time went on, I started to feel like I really wanted to specialize and focus on something. And Lois came to my attention, and I knew that if I wanted to switch somewhere, I wanted to be somewhere that really devoted themselves to being the best in the craft, devoted resources to training and a collaborative environment. And after my first interview, I was sold. And here I am 9 months later, and things have worked out better than I could have ever anticipated.
I guess that's a very interesting point you bring up. Like, when we graduate from law school, and whether it be your first job out of law school or not, and maybe this is a question for everybody, not just Elizabeth here. That idea of a jack of all trades, potentially a master of one, maybe. I remember that feeling in my first job out of law school, where you're completely green in every aspect. And how do you get to be like in a place where you feel super confident? Did either of the two of you, maybe Yasir or Katie, feel like that was also missing from where your careers were before Lois Law Firm?
You mean like a general feeling of knowing what I'm doing, or?
Yeah, I guess like I think everybody has a comfort level, right, Katie, of where they work and how they're doing their job. And this is not to say that, to be honest, like with all three of you, right, if you didn't have that comfort level in your current space, you probably wouldn't be a good candidate to come to this firm, personality wise and, things like that. But I think what Elizabeth touched on is that something that a lot of attorneys feel, at other firms where they don't have a particular direction that's transparent and workable. So, did that apply to either of two of you guys in terms of where you were before you started here?
I can jump in, and that definitely rings true for me in my own experience. Like Elizabeth, this was not, Lois and workers' comp was not my first stop in my legal career journey. I started out in civil litigation on the plaintiff side. Coming into that,
okay.
I had
we'll forgive you, Katie.
That's, nobody's perfect. It's fine.
Right.
But before law school, I had worked in healthcare for a number of years. I went to law school later on. So for me, coming into injury work, I at least felt like I had my head wrapped around the medical aspect of what I was doing, and that absolutely has helped me throughout my journey and does still here. But I don't know about you guys, but when I first started practicing, there's a sense that it's your job to teach yourself how to do your job.
Oh, 100%.
And it comes with all of the stress and pressure of like real-time stakes. You're handling real client matters in a real court in front of a real judge. And without a kind of built-in support network, it can feel a lot like building a plane in midair.
Wow,
You just do the best you can and hope it stays up there. And without a good support network, you can develop that confidence for yourself over time. But I feel like it can take a long time. Whereas just having that kind of mentorship and structure built in kind of helps you feel aerodynamic, before you get off the ground.
Hey, if you found a way to talk about building a plane midair, I initially, like, my heart sank just from the visual of that, but to kind of bring that back together with calling it feeling like you're aerodynamic. That was a really great way to kind of spin it back together. Yasir, I want to ask you this question based on what Katie said, because out of the three guests today, you are the only one that had New York workers' compensation experience before Lois, and so Katie was talking about teaching yourself what was going on in order to start to feel comfortable. Did you have that experience in the industry that you're still in, just with us, like, take you back, like in your last job, or if you want to talk about even before you even entered comp defense, did you feel like you had to teach yourself like the way of, life, or the way to practice?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you, all of you. I would go back slightly even before my time working with the plaintiff plaintiff side or the claimant side in workers' compensation. My initial experience wasn't in civil supreme in the defense side, but not exactly in workers' compensation law. And even then and there, at least me, I would find myself having to teach myself various aspects of practice and learning from the practitioner bits and pieces here and there. That didn't go away when I went into workers' compensation practice for the claimant side. I still found myself having to teach myself things here and there, looking at what others have done before, looking at my fellow practitioners. I did not find that there to be an intentional structure in place where people would learn, not apart from just learning from themselves. That was something that was lacking, at least for me, and that was one of the reasons why I think Lois appealed to me. And of course, then being in the industry, you listen to people, you hear other practitioners, and the name of Lois does ring true to be one of those places where there's an emphasis in training, and that's initially what drove me to venture out and seek out Lois Law Firm. And to my expectations have been met and exceeded in that regard, I would say. So yeah, it was something that was lacking, and that's something that also prompted me to seek out this new venture that I'm in now.
And that's an interesting kind of transition to like another question I wanted to ask you guys, because and while we'll get to how like your experiences have shaped how you ultimately feel about 2025, right? You think of yourselves as, okay, I'm headed in this direction, or I have no direction, or this is what I need in my current position. And then here comes a firm along where they say, okay, we can provide you those things. We can fill those gaps. We can provide you with mentorship in various ways. We have different programs, trainings, all those kinds of things. But I do want to talk about you guys in the interview room, whether that's first or second, remote, in person. The interview is always interesting to me, especially having been at the same firm now and working with the same people for more than 10 years is, I can't remember the last time I interviewed. I mean, the last time I interviewed was for Greg Lois. And so the idea that you can step into an interview, you know that you're going to be talking to someone that's going to tell you all the positives about the firm, right? I'm more interested in the questions that you guys had to make sure that we were the right fit for you, right? Because anyone can have a career arc. Anybody can have questions about their general direction. But heading into an interview as the person being interviewed, that if you ask a question that you can control, right? The answer that you want to receive from the firm that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, right? So when you're getting interviewed, did any of you have that like one or two burning questions that needed to be answered in a certain way before, you signed your name on the proverbial line? I mean, it's 2025. I don't think you guys are signing names in person anymore. But did you guys have any of those questions in that interview process that really kind of nailed it for you?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. I had a pretty good thing going in my previous job, but again, I wanted to specialize, and I knew that if I was going to go somewhere, a lot of firms can talk the talk, they sell you the world, etc. However, I wanted to go somewhere that I knew would really invest in their attorneys and their professionals to ensure that we were actually being the best we could be. And I was told by Mark, and then again by Greg in my second interview, that they have the training program where it's 3 months of training where we're not actually billing any time to clients, but they're devoting that entire period to training us on all aspects of workers' compensation law and the firm's well-established best practices. And so when I heard that the firm was actually willing to devote those resources to making us the best, it really felt to me like they were walking the walk as opposed to just selling us a promise to get us in and start billing hours like a lot of firms do.
Right,
so
right.
For me, that was a bigger.
It is. It's fascinating because it is such a big bet, right? To say to an attorney, right? Like we don't. Not only do we not need you to be immediately profitable, we don't want you to be. We want to shape the foundation of how you practice so that you make the right decisions for clients. And I think, from the client's perspective, right? I think that's a very, very important relationship building aspect. So I guess you had your mindset, Elizabeth, going in was to make sure that there was an investment in you as the attorney, knowing that you were stepping into a new field, right? Because I would imagine that would be so onerous, so overwhelming if there was this burden to immediately, work and create revenue for a firm. Do either of you two, Katie or Yasir, right, having experience in workers' compensation, right, whether that's plaintiff defense, right, I imagine there wasn't that same pressure stepping into the interview room of, I need them to teach me the ins and outs of workers' compensation. Not to say that anybody's an expert stepping in to anything, right? I would imagine that any of the partners at this firm, if they had to interview for the same exact job at a different firm, there's still going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But with either of you two having some background in the industry, did you guys have different questions that you brought to the interview that you wanted to ask in order to, make you cross that finish line?
I can jump in here. I would also kind of harken back to what Elizabeth was saying. One of the questions I definitely did want to have answered for myself was, what does the training program look like? You hear they will train you, but training a new hire months long, different people, different sets of teams, to me was unique. To me, it showed, like you said, investment, long-term investment. To me, it also indicated, okay, if this firm is willing to invest in a new hire, this long-term thinking perhaps translate to other areas. And that seemed to be, to this day, I think I would say it's still the case. That's my understanding now. You invest in your employees, you also invest in the clients that you have. It's not just this one case or the next case. It's a relationship that you want to build moving forward. And I think that translates, and it's very attractive for someone who's trying to venture out. So I would tend to agree with Elizabeth there. And as for myself, who was working at workers' compensation law already, even then, once you practice for a little while, you realize there's value to being a specialist in the field. Just because I knew some workers' compensation law, that didn't mean that, okay, immediately you transition instead of plaintiff side to work in defense. It's the same laws, the same type of practice. But I didn't want to lull myself into a false sense of security that I knew everything. The more you practice in a way, you realize, okay, there are nuances to this field. It's very niche. There are nuances that you have to learn, and that adds tremendous value. In broad strokes, you can perhaps learn workers' compensation law or any law, but there's a value to being a specialist and be around specialists who know the nuances of the law and the practice. And to me, that was also incredibly attractive.
Yeah, those nuances like really, it keeps my heart beating. It's so funny because there is, I don't want to say something negative, but the idea that I'm sure you've had conversations with other attorneys that that don't really understand what we do sometimes, or how that fits into the general idea of representing an employer. or even a petitioner or a claimant. Like, what exactly does that entail? But the fact that our law, our industry is ever changing, that there are new things to implement all the time, both reinforces what, Elizabeth and Yasir, you both were saying about investment and training. It just can't be something that, you train with someone for 2 or 3 days and then you're off on your own, right? It just can't be possible with all the different little elements we have to deal with. But really good point, Yasir. Katie, what about you? Any questions that you brought to your interview that you wanted answered as someone, who wasn't certainly green in the industry? How did it really pan out for you?
I had so many questions in my interview, and they all felt burning, and they all felt just as important to me. But you're right.
So you were really just interviewing us.
Hardcore. No, not 100%. Well, to be fair, I was doing comp defense work at another firm. So when you're
Right.
talking about going from one environment to another, doing the exact same thing, I was less concerned about the training program coming in, and I was way more concerned about what the day-to-day experience of doing the work would look like once I hit the ground running. I was less concerned about having a big training program, but I did want to know what type of day-to-day mentorship and support was available. But also, I personally am a little bit of an indoor-outdoor cat, so, I wanted to know that I would have access to mentors and to other attorneys to be able to speak with. Where I was coming from was a bit of a smaller firm, so there just weren't as many heads in the mix to bounce things off of. But I also know about myself that I do pretty well in a situation where, when I need help, I'll ask you for it. But otherwise, pay no attention to that associate behind the curtain. I work pretty well independently, so I was looking for a pretty, what felt to me like unique balance of having built-in structure and support, but also with a pretty high level of day-to-day autonomy and control over my own file handling.
Yeah, I think that's that's something that I guess I would expect, right? When you do the same thing at a different place, and maybe there might be some changes in terms of like strategy and things that we do here as a firm versus where you came from, but for the most part, you're looking for a better fit, right? Like something that allows you to be you versus, trying to conform to some, predetermined model. It's funny because like, indoor outdoor cat, right? Like I feel like in 2025, everyone's an indoor outdoor cat, right? You kind of have to like feel like you're working in different spaces, just to make everything at max potential, right? Okay, so you guys, you ace the interview, right? We're lucky enough for you guys to come through our doors in 2025. And this is the tough question for me to ask you guys, right? Because I want to know how we made good on our promises to you in 2025. So are there any experiences you had this year that made you say, okay, this actually like makes sense given what they were telling us from day one? Any experiences that you like went through that, okay, like kind of creates that link from, what you expect a firm to say in promotional materials, in interviews, to real day-to-day stuff? Anything like that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I guess you don't know what you don't know. I did know that as I said before, in my previous firm, I was starting to feel like a master of none. I knew that I wanted to go somewhere that was going to train me, But in terms of my expectations for my day-to-day life, I didn't really know what I was looking for. I just knew that I wanted to feel supported. Here I am 9 months later, and we have so many resources here at Lois, especially the office hours. I'm at office hours almost every day, just running quick ideas by more experienced attorneys. We have everyone available by teams. We have these different training programs, like month to month, that all attorneys go to. And so I think that was my big fear in leaving the previous rendition of my career, is going somewhere that was going to sell me something that wasn't a reality. And here at Lois, there's even more than I thought there would be. It's sort of like, I always wanted to be invited to the party, even if I'm not going to go. At Lois, there's always a party happening somewhere that you can jump into and either learn more about ideas by other people. And it's really been refreshing. So I didn't really realize what I was missing before, and now that I'm here, I'm like, oh, I don't know how I could ever go back or go to something less. So yeah, it's honestly really worked out for me in ways beyond I could have anticipated.
Yeah, that's a cool point. Something that we've really emphasized this year, that kind of harkens back to, the old school way of running a law firm, right? Old school, and I think some other firms still do this, where an associate goes through the trenches, and if they survive, meaning they're living and breathing and they haven't left, and they still want more, right? If they get promoted, what is the mantra? They just basically act that same way to the new associates coming in, creating this trickle down effect of, if I have to be put through the ringer to just have my mettle tested, well, that means that if I pass, I just get to be mean and overbearing to the people that come through the door in the next 5 years or so, right? And so the idea of the office hours, the idea of all the programs, I think, Elizabeth, you're what you're saying is actually what those things are intended to do. Have opportunities and options for people that fit within their schedule, and make sure that you're never going to feel like you're alone on an island, right? There's just going to be something that, for instance, with all the materials that we have, we can't put everything pen to paper for someone to just kind of type in like a search bar and says okay, well, that's the answer every single time. And honestly, if that was the case, right, I think it would get boring after a while, right? What about you two, Katie or Yasir, right? Do you have any experiences in 2025 that made you feel okay, this was the right, I'm happy with the choice I made to go to a different firm and to go to Lois specifically?
Rock, paper, scissors here.
You know what? I will let you go this one, but yeah, go ahead, please. I do have something to add to this. Hold on.
For me coming in, I was hired, or I started at the end of August, right? So we're just rounding out our first fiscal quarter here. I've got a good 3 months of data to collect. In the time I've been here, it has been I'm trying to find another way to put this, but I'm going to say it's been a very WYSIWYG experience, in computer terms, what you see is what you get, right? It's very upfront. It's very surface level. You know what the expectations are of you coming in the door, and you know what you get to expect from your employer and from the people working with and around you. And I think when everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they have the tools, time, and space to be able to execute on it, what you have is a group of people who are all getting to operate at a very high level at the same time. And that, just in terms of a day-to-day living environment, my biggest concern walking in the door, that's been a pretty great experience. Having the teams chat with everyone's impacts and updates and announcements, and seeing how everyone else is handling their files, and getting to see everyone's different stylistic choices in how they handle their files within the kind of overarching umbrella of the firm's sorry, I'm tripping over my words, but within the firm's overarching philosophy of pushing the envelope and holding our adversaries to their proofs and making everyone in the room have to step up their game to rise to our occasion has been a very cool experience, even in a pretty short time.
Yeah, I find myself, and not to sound like a broken record, but I mean, I love the impact statements and gratitude statements where, you mentioned, Katie, about like seeing how someone else handled a particular issue, and they give you enough information within the impact or gratitude statement that allows me as the reader to be like, oh, I'm more interested in that than just that, like, like when Twitter used to only require you to write 140 characters, right? Like, I want to find out more. And it's so interesting sometimes to talk to that person who wrote the impact statement, or to even go into our database or the court's open docket to see, like, how did that process actually manufacture itself? Because, even doing this for 12, 13 years, right? I still find myself like, oh, that's an interesting way to go about doing this. Is that repeatable, right? Is that a set of facts that we can kind of use as a benchmark to make the practice even greater? And this like idea of like constant improvement, constant obsession with, the bar is going to be raised anyway. We might as well be the ones that are lifting it up. That's like it's like a daily experience. What about you, Yasir? You mentioned you had a comment on some of this stuff and that you wanted to add.
I lied. Not a comment. Actually, I have a comment. Yeah, so I think feedback loops, they're very real. So when an associate goes from an associate to, let's say, promoted to a higher level, and will that associate then go ahead and try to put through, quote unquote, another attorney through the rigors, bring them up? That's that feedback. Or you can try to be more, you can try to encourage people more, try to be more creative, support them, lift them up. I mean, hence I think the feedback loop of providing others with gratitude, or perhaps writing an impact statement. These little things, they add value. And now that becomes a positive feedback. I think that's something definitely people benefit from. And in terms of handling cases, the emphasis on being creative, even with low probability ideas. I was surprised, like cap session, these are things we do, and to my surprise, you even get credit for it, even if you're not in the training program. Surprised, pleasant. I remember bringing an idea to one of my cap sessions. I think, you know what, this is a low probability idea, but probably we'll do something like this. And immediately was told, no, try it. Let's see what happens. So that's also surprising, but being creative like that, I think it opens up more avenues in an aggregate when all the different attorneys are trying to do something different. I'm sure something good and some creative things come out of it, and even that becomes a positive loop. I think these are things you definitely start to value once you're in it. So yeah, I think those two ideas I think are worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah, the idea of the cap session and bringing in ideas in a group setting, I'd have to imagine maybe even still for the attorneys that are in their first year going there, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say apprehension, but like maybe a little nerves, right? Because, you're opening up your case, not just to someone in a supervisory capacity, but also to your peers, right? And the way that it works is that if you can overcome that hurdle, it is truly, you'll realize that it's truly just a subjective fear, right? That the opening up of your case to the group is designed so those, you termed it like low probability ideas. Just the mentioning of a low probability idea for your case doesn't mean it won't work, one, and two, doesn't mean that it actually could be a high probability action for a different set of facts held by that another person in the room. And that's something that I've experienced myself, is like someone said, like, I don't think this is going to work. But I want to try this. And I have taken ideas like that and then put them to different facts and have it work. It's just an incredible way to keep like the group dynamic going without finding that like mirror set of facts, right? So that's a really cool experience here. I really appreciate all of you guys being so candid. Now is like a tougher question, right? As we close 2025 and we look back on all those things, is there anything that you would have done differently? Anything that you know, I mean, as defense attorneys, we know that we don't win most of the time. So, you know, I understand that, you know, if you could get a different judge, or if you could have the witness actually appear instead of not pick up the phone, certain things like that are going to happen just all the time. But anything that sticks out to you guys in terms of what you would change, if anything, knowing what you know now, completing 2025 as a first-year attorney at Lois?
Would we have all joined Lois sooner?
I don't know. Actually, you know, you'd think that question actually would just be, and like, because we all laughed, just like, oh yeah. Like, I wish we could be here sooner. But like, isn't part of your journey coming here dependent on like an important experience beforehand, right? So maybe I don't know. I just like I laugh thinking like, well, like, yeah, I would hope so, right? Because then you guys would have been part of the team and like even sooner. But that's actually a thought-provoking question. Like, would you guys have made the change at an earlier point in your lives or your career, knowing what you know now?
I would have, absolutely. I spent a few years kind of like shut down with fear of leaving my past position, out of fear of getting bamboozled into coming to some firm that made promises that they couldn't keep.
Right, like devil you know versus the devil you don't.
After a while, you're like, not again. Exactly. I have such high hopes for this one. Like, literally, that was it. And I didn't want to, you know, make the plunge and say, oh, shoot, I left my last job and now I'm somewhere that I'm not happy. And that's like, you know, going back to your initial questions today in terms of the interview process, and like, you don't know what you don't know. And I've really found, I'm not just being a suck up here, that Lois has delivered on the promises. And I just want to say one thing, going back to what you were saying before about like the team aspect. I've been shocked here because anytime, I feel like in the past I've been afraid to speak up about stuff that I don't know, because you have a sort of dog-eat-dog attitude at different, you know, in different firms and just in life in general.
Right, like someone else at the firm will see my weakness or something like that.
We've all been there before. And here it's like, you know, we have this team chat, and sometimes I'll post something, hey, does anyone have any ideas about this sort of deposition? I'll have 8 attorneys message me with transcripts on the very same issue. And it's just genuinely been so nice feeling like I can be, I guess, vulnerable about the things that I don't know, and have people come in and really support me without feeling like I'm, you know, weak. And I've grown so much as an attorney in the past 9 months, just having that support and being able to be, you know, be someone who's learning. And so if I were to change anything, I think would be to trust the process and go through the motions of having to learn what you don't know. And eventually, as time goes on, every day I feel more confident. And, you know, I walk out of hearings oftentimes feeling really proud of what I did. So it's been really wonderful.
You know, Katie mentioned too, it's like dating. I think the only difference is that, you know, doing it, there's no casual dating with your career, right? Like it is, right. It is like you
can't just leave.
Right.
With that, you know, like when you're dating someone, you know, you don't have to line someone else up before you break up with them. Jobs are different. You have to take a leap and hope for the best. You're moving in together on the first date, kind of. 100%. You're all in for a job.
So what about you guys? Like I guess, you know, Elizabeth mentioned the team aspect, not necessarily from feeling support from experienced attorneys. She's talking about support from people at the same experience level, right? And so she mentioned like I would go back and trust the process even more. And I do remember, I like especially for the I actually think we give it to all jurisdictional attorneys in that first onboarding week, right? When we talk about tools and methods, and we say, if you can really focus on building that routine, right? Like we're going to outmaneuver, we're going to outwork our adversary. We're going to be more creative because our value proposition actually is based on our firm values. And so I think that is such a, like a soft skill, quote unquote, like when you hear that on an onboarding session, you're almost like you're expecting to hear that. And I, as a person that's giving that presentation in the first week, I do understand when new attorneys are being like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he's saying that, like, we'll go through these mnemonics and we'll go through these strategies. Yeah, I'll just pick it up when it comes to me. And that's a very interesting take, Elizabeth, is that like, if you could do it, earlier, you would. I just think from the perspective of a new attorney, it's kind of almost impossible, to bring it back full circle to that dating analogy, to not only move in with a new firm as like a, a relationship and already like trust them completely. Right. So I think it might be impossible. I think you're probably not giving yourself enough credit. But what do you guys think about that? Is it possible to, to have that idea that Elizabeth is talking about? Or going back to the question that maybe I asked like 3 questions ago, right? Like, is there anything you guys would do differently?
Generally, when I'm asked to look back at how things have transpired and would I have done something differently or could I have done something differently, I generally answer yes and point to a whole bunch of things. But I genuinely think in this case, if I look back, I don't think I would do anything differently for a couple of reasons. Like number one, I think when you've had experiences in the past, like I think this would be relatable for a lot of people who's working in this industry. Focus on quantity and not so much on quality. It's a volume-based work, but you don't truly know what that is like unless you have some personal experience. And then when you go to somewhere something different, you have a reference point and you realize, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. So I think if I were to say that, I wish I had joined Lowe's 3 years ago, I would not have known what practice in this industry looks like, truly working real cases, not just abstract ideas of, okay, you have a lot of cases. I wouldn't have known. So I don't think for that reason alone, I don't think I would change anything. I think they served as valuable points in my learning. I'm thankful for the people who aided me in that previous firm or previous colleagues that I've had. But it also gave me a reference point to realize, okay, how different things could be. I don't know if firms would just turn down clients, for example. But here we focus on quality, making sure we can truly do the job that we're advertising. That was a pleasant surprise. And I don't think I would, honestly, change anything if I could.
Yeah, you mentioned something about the quantity versus quality. And that makes me go back to, Elizabeth, what you were saying a little bit ago about, having an issue and then having 8 attorneys ready to help you. I think that's one of the unforeseen results of creating and maintaining a good work-life balance is that, we've come so far as a firm in 10 years that, and we've come from all these different experiences. There are times like where I wouldn't be able to be one of those attorneys ever in like a Monday to Friday aspect because I just felt overworked. And if I was overworked and behind on my own things, how could I possibly even have the opportunity to help someone else? So that's like a really, really important thing too, that I think is demonstrative of the industry. And what we're trying to do here is that, yeah, we're not going to give you 80 things to do every day. We want the best of your efforts on the things that you can commit to in a normal period. Does that make sense to you, Katie, coming from a different firm doing defense work? Is that something that, rings true for you in terms of anything you would do differently, or, that idea of quantity, quality analysis?
One of the things that I was looking for when I was looking to switch firms was to be able to have more space and time to devote to my individual files. Just on a basic level, you can't do the quality of work that you really want to be doing when your job is primarily as a firefighter, or just dealing with the crises of the day and then not having a lot of real space left over. So the quality versus quantity issue, debate, whatever you want to call it, was very top mind for me in coming in here, and was among my list of burning questions is, what does your typical caseload look like for your attorneys right now? And honestly, even just having there be a mindful number range of, we like to try to keep it between X and Y, because, for these reasons, we found that under this happens, over this happens, here's our Goldilocks sweet spot, is a level of thought and intentionality that I'm not necessarily accustomed to seeing as a general matter across defense firms, without singling any of them out. So in terms of what I would do differently, and Christian, I'm going to be honest, throughout all of this, I'm not certain if you're asking specifically for since I've joined Lois, or I think if you go much further back than that, it's going to be its own episode. So keeping it there. If anything, I think, if I could rewind the clock the whole 3 months or so that I've been here, I think I would move my dial on being more comfortable speaking up and asking questions right out of the gate. It took me a little bit to kind of trust the sturdiness of the ground under my feet, and coming in with that sense of trusting myself and everyone else around me. If anything, but there's no big regrets here. There's just, if I could wave a magic wand, that's what I do with it.
Well,
Maybe you just say quality, right? Quality like a Michelin star chef.
See, now that was a bold-faced attempt to recreate.
I was going to roll with it.
Honestly, Katie, if you just went with that faster than I interjected, I would have let it happen. But when you laughed immediately, I was like, well, we can't create that to be as organic. So I guess for everyone listening, right? We had attempted a recording of this podcast, and Katie, the analogy queen over here, responded to my inquiry when I said, we know that when you guys step foot on day one, we're not expecting you to be a head chef. And, maybe Katie, I can now ask you, what was the line in that first recording that, people are going to now hear secondhand? What was the line that you gave us that just kind of floored us?
You guys all should have been here the first time. It was so great. The first time around when we did this, the idea that came up was that Lois doesn't expect you to be the head chef. You don't have that kind of responsibility, but they do let you cook. And we had a whole conversation that I'm sad everyone doesn't get to hear around what it's like to go from being something more akin to a line cook, where you're slinging hash browns and scrambled eggs as fast as your flat top can handle them, to being in an environment where you get to care about things like plating and presentation and flavor profiles and how you want to garnish your plate. And that's kind of the sweet spot that I was talking about earlier in this conversation here now, of looking for a level of autonomy, but with the support kind of built into it.
Yeah, I wish we could have finished that recording. That's to everybody listening, that's completely my fault. Our recording equipment kind of blacked out on us. But I want to thank you guys for giving me a second attempt at this. Really appreciate it. And, since we are kind of cutting it close, right? I want to give all of you guys a resolution for 2026. And I was planning to ask you guys what yours was, but I just want to give you guys one myself. It's the same one, right? And it's just to continue to be yourself in 2026. Because, as we look at the end of 2025, 2025 was really good for all three of you, right? And that's why, I asked you to be here. And so when you think about this time next year, December 2026, you can't reach all the heights that you want to reach unless you truly are the best version of yourself. So it's kind of corny, but don't stray far from that, right? Because that's the foundation that is asked of you when we first kind of wanted to start this relationship, right? And to Elizabeth's word, to ask you to move in, right? So just continue to be yourselves. I wish you guys a great holiday season. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at the holiday party, where we can kind of celebrate our victories from the last 12 months. So that would be my resolution for you guys. And to kind of close out 2025, I want to kind of give the listeners a preview of next month's episode. Next month's episode will be the 100th episode of this stupid, dumb, and terrible podcast. So we're going to have some special guests that look back on what they were doing when episode 1 first premiered in 2016. So that will be a treat for you guys. It'll be a treat for me for sure. But for Elizabeth Pappas, Yasir, Miah, and Katie Dilts, my name is Christian Cisan, reminding you to defend from day one.